If you've ever been told that God hates divorce, or that leaving your abusive husband is somehow worse than what he's doing to you, you're in the right place. There are a lot of things we're told in church, and then there are all the things they conveniently leave out. Today, we're tackling one of those hush-hush topics, divorce, especially for women in emotionally and spiritually abusive marriages. And before you ask, no, this is not just my opinion. We're bringing in some hard-hitting research today, specifically from Dr. Valerie Hobbs' study, The Discourse of Divorce in Conservative Christian Sermons. This study lays out exactly how pastors frame divorce in their sermons. And spoiler alert, it's not always in line with reality. Dr. Valerie Hobbs, a researcher at the University of Sheffield, went deep into conservative Christian sermons to find out exactly how pastors talk about divorce. And what did she find? Well, honestly, it's a mix of yikes and are we still really doing this? Here's what she uncovered. First of all, divorce is a highly restricted space. So in these sermons, divorce is portrayed as practically impossible to justify. Pastors go all in on the rules and restrictions, making women feel like they have to stay married no matter what. The second thing she uncovered is divorce as male. Here's where it gets interesting. These sermons overwhelmingly talk about divorce as something men initiate. Women are rarely, if ever, mentioned as active agents in the process, even though, brace yourself, women initiate 2/3 of divorces. This is including Christian marriages. So basically, what's preached from the pulpit isn't matching up with what's actually happening in the real world. And that disconnect has serious consequences for women stuck in abusive marriages. Now, let's talk about the actual reasons people get divorced, not just the ones that pastors like to harp on. Studies show that when women file for divorce, it's usually about survival, not selfishness. According to research, here are the top reasons that women initiate divorce. The number one reason is abuse, either physical, emotional, or spiritual. This is number one. Women leave to protect themselves and their children. The number two reason women leave is infidelity. And there's no surprise here. When men cheat, women are more likely to call it quits. Number three, substance abuse. Addiction and reckless behavior push many women to leave. Okay, now let's compare that to the reasons that men file for divorce. Do you know what the number one reason is that men initiate divorce? They fell out of love. Men are more likely to say they just don't feel it anymore. What's the number two reason? Different values or lifestyles. Things like a career change, or their religious beliefs or personal growth differences. And the number three reason men give for filing divorce is lack of fulfillment. In other words, I'm not happy and I deserve to be happy. Do you see the difference? This is huge. Women leave because they need to. Men leave because they want to. And yet, conservative churches act like women filing for divorce is some rebellious feminist plot. This framing does so much harm because it keeps women spiritually trapped in abusive situations, making them believe that walking away is the real sin instead of what's actually being done to them. All right, so we're going to do some Bible myth busting because the way churches twist scripture to keep women in bad marriages is honestly infuriating. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Did you know that in the Old Testament, God himself gets a divorce? That's right. In Jeremiah 3:8, God says he divorced Israel because of her unfaithfulness. This tells us something crucial. Divorce isn't always wrong in God's eyes. What about the verse in Malachi 2:16 that says, God hates divorce? We've all heard that one, right? This verse is often weaponized against women, but if you read the full context of that whole section of scripture, what that part of scripture is doing is it's actually condemning men who abandon and mistreat their wives. It's not talking at all about trapping women in abusive marriages. How about Jesus' words on divorce in Matthew 19:3-9? Fun fact, Jesus was actually calling out men who discarded their wives for trivial reasons, not setting up a life sentence for women suffering abuse. All right, so that kind of goes along with what I mentioned earlier. The reasons that men give for divorcing are often these trivial reasons. In the Bible, we see over and over again God's heart for the oppressed. Scripture shows God siding with the brokenhearted and protecting the vulnerable. There's a million verses like this, just throwing out Psalm 34:18 and Isaiah 61:1. Nowhere does the Bible teach, stay in your marriage at all costs, even if it's killing you. When we look at biblical marriage customs too, we find something fascinating. In ancient times, marriage certificates called ketubah actually protected women's rights. They outlined what a husband owed his wife, including emotional and physical safety. If a husband violated these terms, guess what? The wife had grounds for divorce. This historical context completely changes how we should read Jesus' words about divorce. He wasn't creating new restrictions. He was protecting women from being casually discarded in a society where they had few rights. Here's another bombshell. That Proverbs 31 woman everyone loves to quote, she was actually a powerful businesswoman who made her own decisions. She wasn't submitting to abuse or staying in a harmful situation. She was strong, capable, and respected. When churches use this passage to guilt women into staying in abusive marriages, they're completely missing the point. This woman was celebrated for her strength, not for her suffering. Let's talk about something that keeps many women trapped: spiritual manipulation. Here are some common tactics abusers use and why they're not biblical. First of all, you're not submitting enough. How many of you have heard that from your church or from well-meaning church people? This twisted version of submission ignores that husbands are commanded to love their wives as Christ loved the church, sacrificially and tenderly. How about this one? You're breaking up the family. Well, actually, the abuser broke up the family when they chose to abuse. You're protecting it by leaving. What about your testimony, you might hear? Your testimony is that you trust God enough to leave an unsafe situation, just like David fled from Saul. But God hates divorce. Yeah, God also hates abuse, lying, and oppression. Why do they never mention those? Many women find their faith actually deepens after leaving an abusive marriage. Why? Because they finally experience God's true character, a God who sees their pain, Genesis 16:13, a God who delivers the oppressed, Psalm 72:14, a God who values truth over appearances, 1 Samuel 16:7. If you're in an emotionally or spiritually abusive marriage, here's what I need you to hear loud and clear. First of all, it is okay and actually important for you to question what you've been taught. If your church only focuses on rules and ignores real suffering, then they are completely missing the heart of God. Number 2, find voices that acknowledge abuse. Not all pastors or theologians push this harmful message that you might be hearing at your church, so seek out those who do get it. Number 3, God cares more about you than legalism. You're not a failure for leaving an abusive marriage, period. And 4, get support. You don't have to do this alone. Find a coach or a therapist, a trusted friend. someone who sees you and supports your safety. One of the best places I know where you can get the support and education you need is a community I started building 8 years ago. It is the education and the community that I needed when I was in my abusive marriage and church. One of our members recently wrote this about the work that she has been doing inside of our Flying Free Kaleidoscope community. She said, "Every course that I've taken through Flying Free and Flying Higher has been life and light giving. I have heard in your words and seen in my mind reflections and reminders of thoughts, prayers, and images that I have carried for decades and now am finally understanding through a changing and clearing lens. Thank you for providing such tremendous resources." For me, divine, unalterable, and authentic love covers and holds me and is my ballast, keeping me from drowning. Flying Free and Flying Higher provide waypoints of safety that remind, reinforce, and nurture the way forward through the storm, deeper into God's love, light, and peace, and moves me towards who I am meant to be. I love that. I thought that was so beautiful. I just had to share it with you. But this kind of internal power and peace is not just for her. It is possible for you too. Go to joinflyingfree.com to learn how you can begin to transform the way you think and feel about your own life and your relationship.